So the Western Australian Council of State School Organisations pays respects to First Nations and traditional custodians throughout Australia, recognising their connection to land, waters and sky. We acknowledge parents, families, elders and communities as first educators, sharers of culture and knowledge, and recognise the value this learning holds for children and young people. I'm coming to you today from the lands of the Kooring and Menang people, and judging by the amount of registrations that we've got people from many different lands tonight, which is fantastic. A little bit of housekeeping to start with. We are actually going to ask you to keep your microphones off unless we open it for questions, for audio questions, just because the background noise can be a little bit distracting for other people. If you have any questions, please put it in the chat, and we might not answer it until the end, but we will answer it at some point. And these recordings and slides will actually be sent out. They will be emailed to everybody who registered and anybody else who's interested. So just be a little bit aware of that when you are asking questions or speaking, that's going to happen. So I'd like to acknowledge a couple of people that we've got on today. We've got Michelle Slater, the CEO of WAXA, and my boss, so I've got to be really nice to her. We've also got Michelle Manolis, who's one of our state councillors, and I believe that Julie, who is our councillor for Great Southern, is going to try and get on as soon as she can as well. Both of those electorates I have a personal connection to, so I say, yeah, go them. So the person that we've got presenting today is Samantha Matthews, or we call her Sam. She's a senior account manager with GSK Insurance Brokers. They are the organisation that we utilise for all our insurance needs, and they have kindly agreed to come along and give us some more information. So I'm going to hand over to Sam, and Sam, you just tell me when you need the slides moved along, and I will do so. And I'm just going to unmute you, Sam. Just 2 secs. Oh, I can't actually unmute you. Maybe you need to do that, Michelle, seeing you muted. Okay, she's there. All right. I'll leave it with you, Sam.
Not very good at technology at the best of times. Okay, so I suppose the first slide is obviously just the introduction, which is the theme of tonight, which is the P&C affiliates presentation. And it's just an overview again of all of the insurances that either are available or that you do have either as part of your WAXO membership or that you might purchase in addition over and above the liability and the voluntary workers personal accident that you have automatically included with your WAXO membership each year. So just a quick brief overview of tonight, just to let you have a bit of a rundown. The changes obviously to the BizPack, which was previously called the BizPack, we now call it the property insurance. And obviously the new insurer is now ANZSA, so it's a little bit about who they are, an overview of the cover, and then we've got a little bit of a revisit of the liability insurance, your voluntary workers personal accident, those of you that have workers' comp insurance, and also just a brief touch on associations liability. So that's pretty much what I've kind of got on the list to run through tonight. Hopefully it won't take too long, and hopefully I won't send you to sleep. So the first one on our PowerPoint presentation is the property insurance. So obviously this is the class of insurance that the P&Cs purchase if you have any assets or property that needs to be insured. Obviously not every P&C does need this, but there are quite a few that are, or it could be something you might need to consider at a further later date. The other thing is you might actually have some assets, but you haven't really thought about insuring them at the moment. So it might be something to give for you to have a bit more thought on.
So what examples, Sam, would P&Cs have of those kinds of insurance, that kind of property? What would you use as an example?
Yeah, so it would be things like if you run a canteen, so it would be not just the kitchen equipment, utensils and things like that that you might own as a P&C, Obviously, bear in mind that if it's a fixed kitchen, a lot of the fixed equipment is probably insured via the school, but then there might be additional equipment that you yourselves have purchased to help run the canteen a bit smoother. Also, the stock, pantry, and frozen food cover. Also, you might have your school uniforms. Stationery, if you purchase stationery supplies for parents to purchase. Also, it could be like fundraising stock that you might have. Sometimes, if it's something that you've been collecting for a period of time, it's obviously if there was a fire or storm damage from, the period that you started collecting until the date the raffle or the fundraising event had taken place. Sometimes fundraising, prizes and things like that can end up being, quite a bit of money. And obviously, if something happened to those and they were destroyed, if you haven't got stock and contents insurance or property insurance, you wouldn't be insured in any way.
And there's also things like if the secretary had a laptop that belongs to the P&C, all those things matter.
100%. You can actually have cover for laptops and things like that belong to the P&C, but they take away from the business premises, i.e. the school premises. It can be insured Australia-wide. So if you're taking them on a plane or something like that, if you're travelling up and down WA, and something happens, your car gets broken into, it gets stolen, or you drop it as you're getting in or out of the vehicle, then you can actually claim for that as well. So with the new, obviously with the BizPack, or what was the BizPack, CGU was the insurer up until the 30th of June 2026, and it was covered under a business pack insurance where you actually bought policy sections, and a premium was charged per policy section based on the sums insured, the units of cover that you purchased. Going forward, CGU, due to their compliance regulations, they were no longer able to offer insurance for what we would call a master scheme policy, which is what this is, where it's one policy number, but it covers many insureds, i.e. each individual P&C. So we obviously had to start looking for another insurer. Fortunately, we did have a couple of insurers willing to work with us, and in particular were great. They actually specialise in community insurance for community organisations, and they were very keen to work with us to provide better cover and to put pricing on a bit more of a fairer standing in respect to the property insurance. So ANZBA became the new insurer for the WAXO P&C affiliate property insurance from 4 p.m. on the 30th of June 2026. The other thing, major changes, obviously, as you would have known, is that WAXO are no longer issuing the tax invoices for the BizPack property insurance. These are now issued directly through GSK to each P&C individually, and then payment is then made directly from the P&C straight to GSK. This was to obviously alleviate WAXO with a substantial amount of work, also to ensure the new codes of practice and compliance that's in place for insurance and placement of insurance is complied with, and that there was no exposure for WAXO from a insurance perspective if there was, I don't know, something that arose that incorrect information might be given or something like that, and then there potentially could have been an exposure for WAXO. So what we decided to do, WAXO and GSK has spoken substantially about it, and we felt overall it was best for GSK to do that processing, etc., and alleviate WAXO, so they've got more time to work on their business. So the basic excess with the ANZSA policy is $500. This is very low for the type of policy that it is, although compared to what it was with CGU, it is a little bit more. Other insurers that were willing to work with us to get property insurance for the P&C affiliates, they would not reduce their excesses below $1,000. So ANZSA came to the party and just for you guys reduced their basic excess down to $500. There is a $1,000 excess that applies to cyclone, flood and storm damage. Then we no longer operate under the units of cover, which is a system that you used to purchase BizPack cover for. We actually just ask for the sums insured and a premium is applied based on that sum insured. The policy is going to be auto-renewed each year based on the previous year's, so on this year's sums insured, to ensure continuity of cover. Because as an insurance broker, we're not actually allowed to cancel, lapse or change any policies without an insured person's written instruction. So then what would happen is obviously if the P&C decided they wanted to cancel the cover because perhaps they've closed their canteen or don't need that anymore, or if they need to make changes to the levels of cover, either increasing, adding or decreasing, they can email us direct and we then action that for them. And the tax invoices are automatically issued, as I said, by us and emailed to the individual P&Cs. And the policy with ANZSA is only available to P&C affiliates with WAPSO. So the new insurer, it is ANZSA Insurance Limited, and the period of insurance for the year is the 30th of June 26 to the 30th of June 27. So, and I just wanted to run past why we actually chose ANZSA. So ANZSA, they're a leading specialist insurer and they specialise in risk management solutions for the community service organisations, including charities, not-for-profit organisations, staff, volunteers and visitors. ANZSA understands the unique risks faced by community service and the not-for-profit organisations. Increasing pressure on boards and management teams operating within community service sector to deliver safe and relevant services to the communities that they serve. ANZSA is passionate about providing exceptional service, great claims experience and specialised products and risk solutions unique in the current highly complex environment of today. So property and assets. Every P&C will have assets of some sort, either owned, on loan or borrowed, which needs to be insured. These can be insured through the property insurance. Alternatively, you might choose to self-insure, and what that would mean in the event of any damage to property, you will be paying for those costs for replacement or repair yourself as opposed to risk transfer to an insurance policy. Potential exposures to be thinking about is obviously fire, storm damage, vandalism, lightning strikes, that kind of thing. This can include stock in a canteen or a uniform shop. It can include audio equipment, and as we discussed, portable computer equipment. It could be tables for stalls, plates, etc. The ANZSA policy that we now provide, it provides a lot of additional covers which the CGU policy didn't provide, or you had to purchase it. ANZSA policy automatically provides cover for theft, portable equipment, machinery breakdown, as well as many other additional benefits. All of these are listed on the policy invoice schedule under the sublimits of cover.
And we also have it on our website.
Oh, fabulous. It's even better. Now, the ANS for property insurance, it does have what we call two sections to it. So obviously section 1 is what we would call the property material damage. So that would cover the damage to the actual asset itself. So if it was either needed repairing and or it needed to be replaced, the cost of replacement or repair, less your excess, would be insured under section 1. Section 2 is what we call business interruption. So what this does is it replaces a lost income and pays ongoing expenses following an insurable claim under the material damage section. So if there was storm damage to the premises, for instance, that your school canteen is in or your school uniform shop, and you obviously, the material damage section would cover the replacement cost of these school uniforms and or the canteen equipment and stock, but it might take 6 or 7 months to actually have the repairs carried out to the actual premises itself that's been damaged and or destroyed. It could take even longer. So what business interruption does is, whilst you're unable to trade, it will provide you with the loss of income that you would incur during that period. Once you're back up and trading, it will still keep paying out until either the sum insured or the indemnity period has been used up, or until your business is fully operational back to where it was immediately prior to the claim. So, and whilst obviously revenue, you might be able to maintain it through the use of alternative facilities, there's almost always a significant additional expense incurred, such as hiring equipment or outsourcing catering services, because you can't actually do those normal catering services yourself. So one of the policies that's included under your WAXO membership is public and product liability. And this is always a big cause for concern and also discussion. I would say probably majority of our our inquiries that come through either via email or the phone are from a liability aspect. And the liability, it's one of those things, it's a very grey area. The reason why is because public and product liability, it is designed to cover allegations or claims that arise to third parties as a result of your negligence, for which you are legally liable for. So there's a lot of jargon in that. So the key triggers is obviously negligence. Have you done something that a reasonable person in your professional position would or would not do? And are you legally liable for that? If so, and there's been a third party, either injury or property damage, then that will trigger the policy. As the insured, obviously each P&C has a duty of care to ensure that whatever event they're either organising or participating in, that you have provided a safe environment, you have all the necessary health and safety requirements complied with, and all of your practice and procedures are complied with as well.
Can I just jump in there for a sec, Sam?
Sure.
So when we're talking about product liability, what if somebody bought something off Temu and was selling it through at a stall that they were holding?
Sure. So with products liability, it's a little bit different. When you are importing goods, i.e. from overseas, China or anywhere like that, you become, in theory, the manufacturer. So there is no right for recovery if a product liability claim becomes active. So what happens is that you have a duty of care to ensure that whatever products you purchase and bring into the country, they comply with Australian standards. So any toys, toiletries, things like that, generally we would recommend you try and stay away from those. But if you do, you have to do your due diligence and ensure that those products comply with Australian standards. If they don't, and a third party is injured or there's property damage to a third party, you're not going to be insured. One of the main things that will trigger the claim as well is obviously you have legal defence costs. So generally what happens is before there's before actually there's a decision made whether you are legally liable and if compensation or damages is going to be awarded to that third party, legal defence costs are incurred. So first off, we have to pay those legal defence costs. So what happens in the event of a claim is that we would obviously have the claim form filled out, present it to the insurer. The insurers then review the claim and appoint their lawyer. So, and their lawyers are specialists within for liability, and depending on the actual specifics of the claim, they will drill down even further to make sure that the best legal counsel are provided.
Thanks, Sam. We've just actually had a question, if you don't mind me jumping in here, from, I think it's probably Stacey from Warrior Pendy. What kind of documentation is required to prove due diligence?
It could be something like, obviously you have a practices and procedures checklist that you would go through, check to make sure that all of your people that are not attending but are actually participating in any events, if you've got stalls and entertainment and things like that, they all have to have their own liability insurance. So you need to make sure you have all of that. If there's any contractors that you're engaging for setting up stages and things like that, you need to make sure that you have a copy of their insurance for that. Obviously, you might have some like safety questionnaires. I think WAXO do provide a lot of literature to help support each P&C affiliate with this kind of stuff. So you can go around and check to make sure that any health and safety issues are covered. You've got a first aid person on site if required. If there's a location outside of the school grounds that you're attending, that you must notify us if there's more than 500 attendees at any one time. So really it's to make sure that everything is as it should be, as far as a reasonable person can do in that position. Ultimately, if you do have stall holders, and contractors, they're providing entertainment, they themselves also have their own duty of care and their own due diligence they need to tick off as well. So it's not your job to make sure that they're wearing the right costumes or anything like that. But obviously, you need to make sure that people that might be spectating, they're far enough away that should something happen, they're not going to potentially be injured. If they're playing a sporting game or something like that, there's always thought that needs to be considered to spectators that may be around the oval watching. Could they get injured in any way? If there's potholes and things like that. Also, vehicles in car parks. If someone's playing, I don't know what, a cricket, I suppose, and the cricket ball goes flying, which it does, and therefore it lands on a vehicle, that's a typical third-party property damage claim that could arise. There is also vicarious liability. So that is when you are called into, not that you're not solely, the P&C isn't solely legally liable, but you are joined, you are attached to a potential liability claim because it was on your grounds, or one of your volunteers or officers was involved in some way, and therefore there's a vicarious liability exposure there as well. Even if you're helping out at school excursions, but on sporting days and things like that, there's still a vicarious liability exposure, even though it's been undertaken and organised by the school. If you have P&C volunteers and members helping out, there could potentially be a bit of a crossover. So your policy under the public liability does include vicarious liability for that particular reason. So the next one is obviously your voluntary workers.
These are amazing people, the people that volunteer for our P&Cs, Sam. They're just incredible what they do for education.
100%, and that is exactly why these guys need to be looked after. They give up their time and effort, for pure love, and I hold my hat off to all volunteers, and they're there with the best intention to help out and provide a fun, day for everybody that's involved. Unfortunately, sometimes accidents do happen. The good news is under your WAXO membership, voluntary workers personal accident cover is included. So what this does is any authorised volunteer, let's just speak of over the age of 18 for the moment. If they are injured and unable to either do their normal job or unable to do their home duties because they've broken a leg and they've had to have surgery and they have to have bed rest for 6-8 weeks, there's potentially a loss of earnings that they could lose out on. They might need to have additional care and help, which they had to pay for to come in and help them for a period of time. Also, there could be other rehab and out-of-pocket expenses that they might incur to attend physio and things like that. Also, there might be some home modification or additional items they might need to hire during their rehabilitation to assist them with things like showering or getting up and down off of a chair, getting in and out of bed, etc. So what your policy does is it provides a weekly benefit. There's only a 7-day wait period, which is great because a lot of voluntary workers policies, they have a 14 or 28-day. But yours has only a 7-day wait period, and the weekly benefit is payable up to 2 years. There is also what we call capital lump sum benefit as well. So for permanent disability, a loss of limb or something more severe, there is a capital lump sum benefit paid out as well. And this is an accidental policy, so there doesn't have to be any admission of liability or anything like that. It literally just means they've had an injury whilst they were attending and helping out as a volunteer. They're unable to either perform their normal duties or job, and they need financial support to hire in additional help and or cover the costs of lost wages during that time.
And can I just jump in again? Sorry.
Sure.
You made a comment about authorised volunteers. I can't remember the exact word that you used, but this is a question that we get a lot at WAXO. So if we've got parent help that aren't actually members of the P&C, what we suggest is that they always make sure that they are documented in the minutes of the meeting, or that they have a sign-in sheet when people actually attend these events. So is that something that you would suggest as well?
Absolutely, because you do have to have some kind of document to obviously prove that they were a authorised volunteer and not just some random that's trying to, put a claim in, saying, oh, yes, I did, help that person with a cup of coffee, so therefore I'm a volunteer.
Yep.
I think.
Yep, absolutely.
You do provide a lot of support to assist P&Cs with them being able to identify who those are.
And we've also got a question here from Jill. She said, are teachers that are helping the P&C as volunteers for before and after school, are they covered under this policy as well? I'm going to answer that, Jill. Any person can volunteer on behalf of the P&C. Doesn't matter if they're teachers, it doesn't matter if they're a grandparent, it doesn't matter who they are. And Sam is going to talk about the difference between under and over 18 shortly. But as long as they are registered as volunteering for the P&C, then they would be covered. And it has to be a P&C event. Obviously not if it's a school event, then it would be covered by the school. I hope that answers your question, Jill.
So with the under 18s, because obviously nowadays a lot of, the school children and the younger siblings and older siblings also want to help out as well, which is great. Sometimes, obviously, as I said, injuries do happen, and this policy does also provide a child permanent injury benefit of $25,000. It doesn't provide any weekly benefit because they are deemed a dependent. Obviously, there wouldn't be any financial loss of earnings from the child. So it's a bit tricky because, you could say, well, parents might have to take time off work. Unfortunately, if we included that kind of cover, the premiums would basically be so expensive that it may not necessarily justify the reason for having the insurance in the first place. Predominantly, it is designed for 18s and over, because if they are unable to go to work, or they need additional help as a caregiver, to have care for themselves, then obviously it provides an income for that. The other policy, which is something that not all P&Cs need to have, because if you don't have any employees or workers that you engage, then there's no need to have workers' compensation. However, there's quite a number of P&Cs who do engage workers, could be running the canteen and running uniform shops, and obviously worker is paid an income from the P&C's turnover, basically. It's not a voluntary worker. It's not someone who is on workplace training or that kind of thing. It has to be a formal employee and or contractor that's engaged by the P&C, and the P&C pays the wages to them. So the difference between an employee and a contractor, in a nutshell: an employee, you pay their salary less their taxes and their super. So obviously you make deductions for taxes and you make deductions of super. With a contractor, they invoice you, and then they then sort their own super and their taxes out themselves. If there is a master-servant relationship, i.e. that worker is engaged to run the canteen, and that you have obviously, you say to them, right, this is how you run the canteen, and they're working like that as a contractor, they are still deemed a worker under the Workers' Comp Act, under the definition of a worker. The definition of a worker is where it's not always about how they're paid. It's what kind of relationship is there between the employer and the employee, the employer and the contractor, or the principal contractor and the subcontractor. So
can I just jump in again? Sorry, Sam. Sorry to keep interrupting you, but Jen has asked the question, would an online sign-up sheet for volunteers be sufficient, or would you advise a sign-up sheet on the day? I'm going to give you the response that I would suggest to P&Cs. Please tell me if I'm wrong. We would always suggest a sign-up sheet on the day, because it actually shows that they've turned up. And part of that can be, I've read the safety instructions at the top. I'm wearing proper boots when I'm digging in a garden or something like that. So I would always personally recommend that you've got that sign-up sheet on the day. Is that what you would suggest, Sam?
100%. The reason being is obviously they may have all intentions of turning up, then there could be some reason why not. They could be ill, they could have something, an emergency cropped up. So yes, absolutely.
Excellent.
So with workers' comp, obviously there's no cover, as I say, for any voluntary workers, because that's covered under the voluntary workers PA. What workers' comp provides is work cover for work-related injuries. So it provides cover for loss of wages, medical costs, and if there's a permanent impairment, it will pay a set amount of damages for that permanent impairment. Workers' comp is governed by the Work Cover WA, and each state has a different governing body for workers' comp, and each state manages their workers' comp independently of the other. Workers' comp is a no-fault system, so there is no requirement for negligence by the P&C. It could purely be accidental. If they've slipped, a lot of slip and fall accidents are quite common, or knife injuries, cutting injuries, especially in the kitchens. And so if they've injured themselves whilst at work, the workers' comp policy can be triggered. The policy is actually triggered by the injured worker, not by the employer. So the injured worker would decide whether they want to lodge a workers' comp claim. There's a set form for the injured worker that needs to fill in, plus they have to get what we call a first certificate of capacity, which is a doctor's note, but it's a specific for workers' comp. You, as the employers, would then need to fill out the employer claim form. It all has to be lodged. I think the injured worker claim form, when you receive that, you have 72 hours to complete and lodge the claim as a whole to us. We then have to lodge everything within 7 days.
Sorry, Sam, can you say that again just for clarity?
Certainly. So with the workers' comp, there's 2 claim forms. There's one that the injured worker fills out, and that has to be completed and returned with their first certificate of capacity, which is always issued by a doctor. When that is sent to the employer, i.e. the P&C has 72 hours to complete their form and lodge all of the forms together to us. Once that is received by us, we then have 7 days to lodge the claim form with the insurer. These are not our requirements, it's actually work cover requirements.
And so my recommendation would always be, as soon as you know of anything, contact GSK straight away. So Stacey has asked about what about the accidents for volunteer workers? I think she means in terms of time constraints.
There is no time constraint. I mean, genuinely, if there is a claim with a voluntary worker, it's usually lodged reasonably quickly. Sometimes it doesn't have to be within a few days. It could be a few months sometimes, because it depends on the nature of the injury and how the injured voluntary worker is obviously recovering, etc. And sometimes they may choose not to claim, but there is no time restraints like there is with workers' comp.
Thanks.
The reason workers' comp has time restraints is because it's a statutory requirement to have workers' comp, whereas with voluntary workers, it's not a statutory requirement. The workers' comp policy is what we call a deposit and adjustable premium. So what that means is that at the beginning of each policy period, you will provide an estimated remuneration declaration where you'll declare what you think the estimated wages are going to be for the new period of insurance. Then at the end of the policy period, you complete an actual remuneration declaration where you declare the actual wages that had been paid during that period. If you overestimated at the start of the period, you would get a refund subject to the minimum premium on the policy. If you underestimated, then there would be an additional premium to be paid, again, which is always subject to the minimum premium on the policy. Sometimes, even though you've got a minimum premium, if you've paid more wages, you still might sit within that minimum premium buffer, if you like. If you do not complete and return wages declarations, or as we call them now, remuneration declarations, within 30 days of the expiry date of your policy, Work Cover WA can impose a fine of up to $10,000. We have seen a few of these happen. Generally, it tends to be the habitual ones that never complete their forms. However, as your broker, we obviously have a requirement to let you know that, to be aware that this, this can happen. So that is it for workers' comp. The last thing I wanted to quickly touch on, which is associations liability, which is a bit of a burning topic. It has been for a while. It's one of those policies where you don't necessarily think you need it until you actually really need it. And in today's society, unfortunately, more and more allegations can be presented, which instantly triggers defence costs. So, if you receive, an allegation for a wrongful act as a result of running the P&C, then you would need to seek legal advice and and start proceedings to obviously defend that. Now, currently, we don't have many P&Cs that insure associated liability. I think a lot of it is awareness. A lot of it is, some of it is cost, and also kind of like hoping that it never happens, or you mitigate it yourself with success. It is something, again, as your insurance broker, we like to, let you know there is a product out there. It is designed specifically for all community associations, community organisations that run the risk of being sued for alleged wrongful acts as a result of the operations. So a wrongful act is actually a very broad term. It could be incompetent supervision. You didn't supervise a particular event accurately or effectively. It could be ineffective administration. It could be embezzlement of funds. And these don't have to have actually happened. It's just an allegation. So someone could literally just say, we believe that you've been misusing assets or you've been embezzling funds. And we're not only going to name the association itself, but we're actually going to name Mr. and Mrs. Jones, or Mr. Jones, the treasurer. So it's not only the association itself that can be dragged into legal proceedings, but it can be individual officers and members that can be brought in and personally sued. So with associations liability, obviously, it would provide you cover for any defence costs to defend those claims. And if compensation was awarded to that third party, it would cover the costs of those as well. This is something that, again, it is something that needs to be considered, because as you'll be aware, a lot of your board officers and members are volunteers. They spend, invest a lot of time and effort into running the P&C effectively. And the last thing anybody would want is for them to be subjected to an allegation for a wrongful act or sued for, bullying or harassment, which this kind of policy would cover as well.
So can I just jump in again, Sam? Jen has asked, does WAXO have advice on if associations liability is worth it? And she's also interested in how much GSK would recommend P&Cs have coverage for, as in a dollar amount. So WAXO would always advise you to do your due diligence about whether or not you think you need this, and it is actually something that the P&C needs to decide. It's not something that we would necessarily recommend. And I'm going to let Sam talk now about whether or not she would recommend that P&Cs have coverage for it and how much.
Yes, 100%. So it's kind of like that question's how long's a piece of string? We always say buy as much as you can afford. Minimum limit, we can actually get a minimum limit of $100,000. The premiums probably sit around about $300 plus the GST and stamp duty, but you can get right up to 20 million limit. So, and everything in between. Generally, we wouldn't recommend a limit below 250. Our kind of sweet spot that we tend to suggest is 1 mil limit. But if your budget doesn't allow, then we always say, well, if you buy lower, you're better to have the lower limit and have that covered than to have none at all. Because, even if you have a $250,000 limit, in the event of a claim arising, that's $250,000 you haven't got to find yourself out of your own kitty. So that's pretty much my presentation completed for the evening. You know where we are. If you have any questions, please feel free to call myself and or Savannah at any time. I'm the senior account exec, so I've got the most probably technical knowledge, if you like. So I'm more than happy to assist. Savannah is very good to provide your day-to-day support and backup. And the less complex questions, she's more than capable of managing those as well. So you can call us on the phone, office phone number, or we do have a dedicated P&C GSK inbox as well.
Do you want me to read your general advice warning, Sam, or are you happy for it just to be part of the slides?
That can just be part of the slide, that's okay. Fine.
Excellent. So just before we get on to questions, one of the really important things that we're trying to do with WAXO is to make sure that we are giving you guys the kind of support and service that you need. So what we really need you to do, please, is use this QR code to complete our session evaluation. It won't take long to complete. I'm going to leave it up there in the hope that everybody who's on today will actually complete this evaluation, and when we send out the slides, hopefully everybody will do the same then as well. Now, what I will do is I will open to questions if anybody has any. If you'd like to, you can use the hand button to raise your hand and I can unmute you, or you can put the question in the chat. So Rochelle has said, in terms of portable goods, in this case iPads, would the item be covered if it's taken home and looked after by an authorised volunteer rather than a P&C member?
Yes, because it's the equipment itself that's insured. As long as that volunteer member has permission to take it, then yes, it would be covered.
Rochelle, we would always suggest that you actually document it in the minutes so that you've got proof that that's the case. And Rochelle says that's awesome, thank you. And Claire is asking a question. Would you like me to unmute you, Claire? Would that be easier? I'm going to unmute you, Claire, if I can. There we go. So what about non-contact sport? Is that covered? I'm going to.
For P&C training or fundraising events?
So for an event.
Yeah. So there is a list of what sports are not covered under the liability insurance. If you are doing, if it's a one-off fundraising event where you're just playing perhaps friendly netball game or basketball and it's a one-off, then yes, you would be covered. If it's a regular training participation that you're doing, provided you have a regular first aid person present, and preferably the coach is trained and qualified. All we would need is to know how regular these training sessions occur, and we then can add it onto the liability policy. It's probably easier to say what sports are not included as opposed to say what is included. And I can say there is a list on the public liability invoice schedule, and it does, things that aren't covered is obviously things like soccer, boxing, AFL, rugby, swimming, cycling, horse riding, any kind of water sport or activity, bubble soccer, boxing, baseball, archery, and any fitness which includes weights.
Okay. Rochelle, there are some other questions that are on a different topic, but I will actually ask Rochelle's question at the moment. She said, we run weekly running club. Kids do laps of the cross-country course. Should we have that added? Or will it automatically be covered?
No, what I would like you to do is to flick me an email to say you run a running club, what time it starts and what day and for how long for, where do you run. If you run around the oval, there should not be any issues at all. If you're running out on public footpaths, crossing roads, things like that, that might be a little bit different. We would need to ask a little bit more information. So just flick me an email with the information on where, how, when, who supervises you with that, and then we can respond to that for you.
And one of the things we always tell our P&Cs is if there's any sort of information that might be needed, just to give you guys a call, and then you can ask the right questions. We can't ask the right questions because we don't know. So Jill has asked, does our current cover, thank you for that tongue twister, Jill, does it cover the P&C hiring out equipment to non-members?
This has been a little bit of, been a lot going on about this the last couple of months, especially in connection with phone cannons. And the answer, if you're hiring any item, any asset that you own for hire and reward, so you're receiving financial benefit by hiring that out, the answer to another P&C is yes, you are covered. To any third party outside of a P&C, no, you're not.
So if they wanted to get cover, they can contact you, I assume, and find out if they can get cover in a different way?
Unfortunately, I've exhausted this particular market. Although the actual item is covered itself, we can get cover itself for the item itself if it's damaged. The liability aspect, you actually can't get liability. It would be on that third party who's using the equipment to get their own liability insurance to cover the event.
So she's asked if, for instance, it was another association like a footy club, so that footy club would have to have their own public and products liability.
Yeah. And we would, we would also recommend that you ask for a copy of their liability insurance and ask for you to be named for that particular event as a principal. So
and if you contact Samantha, she will tell you what you need to get included.
Yeah, 100%.
Yep, fantastic. Claire has asked, if events with alcohol, what are the rules and restrictions to stay compliant? First of all, do some sort of risk management test.
100%. There is no specific insurance rules as such. Obviously, you have to make sure you comply with all of the licensing requirements, no serving to under 80s, all that kind of thing. It's more about your health and safety, you know, slip and fall, how you manage those kind of spills and things like that. Is it a paid bar? You know, and if it's a bar that's paid, I'm sure there's criteria that you have to follow that a normal pub or bar would have to follow, as in when you cease serving a particular person, what to look out for. Generally speaking, you know, we would also encourage, if you do have events where you're having alcohol, try to discourage children being in attendance.
Excellent. I think we've covered all the questions in the chat, but yes. I imagine that, as always, you're quite happy to receive emails from people asking specific questions. And if there are questions that come up that all the P&Cs might want to know, please forward them back to us, Sam, and we can possibly include them in an e-news if we can have questions coming from our presentation today. We do still have that QR code up, if everybody could actually do fill in that form for us. It looks like we've got a couple more questions coming up, but we will stop the webinar at 8 o'clock, so you've got a couple of minutes, but if people would have asked all their questions, they feel free to drop off, but we will stay here till 8, won't we, Sam?
100%.
But thank you all for attending, for anyone who does drop off, and please let us know if you've got any questions. I can see Michelle's sending an email and a couple of others. No, Michelle's saying thank you. Excellent. I'm glad you enjoyed it, Michelle. That's fantastic.
My pleasure.
And Jen has said thanks as well. So excellent. There you go. It was fabulous.
Oh, that's lovely.
Yeah. So what we will do is we will make this recording available to anybody, all of our P&Cs at least, as well as the slides and everything. So, yeah, excellent. Oh, do we need to prove Australian standards when buying products from overseas? Do we need anything to prove that it's Australian standards?
Well, generally they should have something written on there to say it is standards Australian standards approved. But if there isn't, and you can obviously go and have a look on this Australian standards and just check to see whether that has complied. If it has, whether you've got a checklist of your own to do, then I would probably recommend you do some kind of a checklist just to show your due diligence that you have checked it on the website or wherever it is and it is compliant.
Fantastic. Okay, well, we might leave it there. Thank you, everybody, for coming, and we will finish up the meeting now. Thanks again, Sam. Much appreciated. And please, everybody that's still on, fill in that survey. It would be very helpful to us.
No worries. Thanks so much.
Excellent. Thanks, everyone. Bye now.
Bye.